What's up, boss? It's time again for Collection Connection, the game that's just an excuse to talk about records. Every Monday over on the Plastic Soundwave Cult channel here on YouTube, my brother Plastic Eric presents an album from his music collection, and I am tasked with listening to it and then finding something out of my own collection that shares some facet or quirk with either the specific album that Eric talked about or the artist in general. I give my thoughts about both records and leave you with the challenge of working out the reason I chose to link those two albums. And so up first today, we've got a hybrid new album greatest hits released in 2007 by Matchbox 20 called Exile on Mainstream. From this oft-maligned pop rock band, I have forged a connection to a landmark 1993 debut album that almost always lands on any greatest albums list it's eligible for, Liz Phair's Exile on Guyville. Conceptually, I think it's a quality connection today, but let's be honest, not a super tricky one. Even so, the fact that both albums start with the word exile is not in itself the connection. So, if you know the slightly deeper common ground that these two albums share, you can leave your guess in the comments where you'll earn a shout out in my brother's next video. But first, let's reveal the connection between not just the prior pair of albums, but the last four albums. We did 4 in a row with the same connection, those being Red Hot and Blue, Wonderland from Big Country, Time on Earth from Crowded House, and Exile on Mainstream from Matchbox 20. The connection there is that each album was, in part, produced by Steve Lillywhite. Steve Lillywhite, even though I don't know this for sure, I think was integral maybe to the making of the Red Hot and Blue album, maybe attracting a lot of the talent because a lot of the people who appeared on that, whose songs he produced, were acts that he had worked with before and or was married to, in the case of Kirsty MacColl. With Wonderland, I think it was the new material that was on that mini album. The stuff that was looking toward Steeltown was produced by Steve Lillywhite. He did not produce their first record, which had some hangovers that didn't make the album that were also on that EP/mini album. Time on Earth, if you watched that really long collection connection last week, you'll know that they came back when they reformed a new lineup for Crowded House, recorded 4 new songs, and those 4 new songs were produced by Steve Lillywhite. And finally, Matchbox 20. I think the new material, I'm not sure if he produced anything from their first 3 albums, which are cherry-picked from for the greatest hits portion of this album, but the new material that appeared on Exile on Mainstream was produced by Steve Lillywhite. So there you go. That is the connection, a long one, long-winded one, and it took 4 in a row. We can't do every connection 4 in a row, but it was guessed finally by Murdoch from Murdoch's Music Minute, who's back from vacations. He's got some recent videos up going over some concerts that he went to while he was on vacation with Suede and the Manic Street Preachers and Air. Those are the ones that I've seen anyway. I'm not sure if he has more than that. But yeah, congratulations to Murdoch. Thanks for bailing us out and ending this 4-album streak of albums partly produced by Steve Lillywhite. And so with that, let's get on with the show. Okay, so Eric did show Exile on Mainstream, which is a clever title, and made me want to play, speaking of Kirsty MacColl's Electric Landlady, which is one of my favorite puns on a previously existing album title, Jimi Hendrix Electric Ladyland. But I don't have that particular album, otherwise I would have done that connection. I do have some Kirsty MacColl, but not that particular album. But in any case, it is a clever title. I feel like it is maybe a little, Poor Little Rich Kid, in that they started with You or Someone Like You, or I forget the exact name of their album. That was a huge, huge album. Sold 12 million copies in the US. They were a big hit right out of the gate. And even though each subsequent album sold fewer copies, by the time they got to their third album, it still went double platinum. So it is a little bit of oh boo-hoo, nobody's buying our records anymore. But I can kind of see maybe an interpretation where public opinion sort of had turned on them. I think especially when Rob Thomas did Smooth, and that was such a huge, inescapable hit on top of several Matchbox 20 songs that were inescapable hits, that people had just sort of had their fill. So as we tend to focus on the negative, I think largely it's a human trait, feeling like they weren't as popular, even though they were still plenty popular at that time. They felt like, on mainstream radio, nobody wanted to listen to them or play their songs anymore. And I think it's just as a result of overexposure, because listening to it, I didn't realize when I first listened to it that it opens with the new material. And so as I listened to it, I thought, if it didn't have the baggage of being Matchbox 20, it would at least sort of make me raise my eyebrow. It's one of those things where I guess having a little too much context flavors, your opinion of the music, because you're already in kind of a Matchbox 20, okay. Which isn't to say that I hated them, because the music is competent and catchy. That's why they caught on, because they were catchy. And then later when it got into the hits and stuff, I'm like, okay, I couldn't even have told you how any of them went really before hearing them, even though I had heard them and heard them and heard them. I hadn't heard them in a number of years now. But weirdly, it almost makes me nostalgic for, when bands were popular. You just don't really hear music made by bands that much. Music that sounds like that. Music that sounds like a band recorded it in a studio. And I know that's the subject of a whole Rick Beato controversy recently. But there's something to it, that it even sort of middle of the road music. I think of it as music for people who don't really like music. Stuff that's not hard to listen to, but is maybe hard to love. Gets very popular because it is so sort of mediocre. That then causes the backlash. It's another Hootie and the Blowfish or Huey Lewis in the News. Stuff that's not bad, but it's not great. It just catches enough people's ear that it becomes bigger than it really ought to be. And then people turn on it because it got bigger than it ought to be. That's sort of my take on it. But again, with, the hindsight, 20 plus years on, sort of from their heyday, I thought it was pleasant, It's not even that badly written. It's just fine. I'm not a huge Rob Thomas fan. I don't really love his vocals, but I thought it was okay. It's nothing I'm ever going to buy, but I do miss when bands could be popular. There is part of my heart that yearns for that. So that's my take on that. As far as the connection, I'm putting out Liz Phair's Exile in Guyville from 1993, Matador Records. This is a classic that sort of had to win me over. I bought it, I think, pretty close to contemporaneously when it came out, but was not bowled over by it, and I think I got it based on reputation. Everybody was talking it up. What a great album. And barring a couple of songs, it never really hit strong rotation for me. And I don't think I appreciated it. It was more the sort of the pearl clutching outrage, by some of the lyrics that seemed to be the thing that the media really, hung all its coverage on. And I feel like in some ways that ruined Liz Phair's career personally, because I don't know, even with some of the immediate follow-ups that are generally well regarded. I own Whip Smart, which is the only other Liz Phair album that I have, but it's even that one I feel like falls well short. And I listened to that when I listened to this yesterday, and I think it gets a little better in the second half, and maybe I need to listen to that one more because the first half turns me off a little bit. But it felt like she herself started to focus on sort of the naughty words and stuff like that, rather than the sort of raw nerve, plain language that it felt like on Exile in Guyville. I didn't really try to really ingest it as a record until sort of after her star had already fallen a little bit and her career has taken weird paths that started on the mountaintop, kind of like Matchbox 20, if there's a way that you could word that it was the same thing. That's still not the connection, that their biggest album, their first album was their biggest album, because it's not even necessarily true. Matchbox 20 was, for sure, but I think Liz Phair has had albums that sold more than Exile in Guyville, but none that have had the impact that Exile in Guyville did. There's not a whole lot, especially from, like female rock stars, that felt like leading up to this album. The very non-singery vocals maybe had a precursor in like Kim Gordon from Sonic Youth, but even sort of raspier singers like Pretenders, Chrissy Hynde, and like Joan Jett still felt like they were singing. This feels like she's out of tune half the time and almost talking, more than singing, but like talking rhythmically, and maybe has a real Lou Reed feel to it musically. She sings, I think, the way that Lou Reed sings. It's kind of poetic, it's talky, it's rhythmically. Every so often it'll kind of hit a bit of a melody, but it sounds like she could sing her songs at the volume that I'm speaking at now. But as for the songs, just to make sure that I don't forget to say it, I should start off by saying Divorce Song is got to be one of the best lyrics like ever written. That really hits the mark and is so layered and insightful, I feel like, in how a relationship sort of breaks down. We're not bad people, but we don't always do the best things. We're not the best for each other. And I don't know, our relationship is at a level where it's easy for us to hurt each other's feelings, but we don't realize that we're hurting each other's feelings because we're just sort of checked out at that point. And you could almost do a whole video just on that song, just on Divorce Song, because some of those lines just hit like sledgehammers, especially because they're not delivered like they hit like sledgehammers. It's so sort of undersold that it really gets me. Other songs, Never Said, I think was the other one, was a single, was the only one I ever really heard out in the wild. Fairly simple, but it's not like groundbreaking, but it's not a bad song either. It's a good song. Flower is, of course, the one that really got a lot of. Flower and Fucking Run are the two songs that probably got the most press. And I think, again, what is impressive about it is that it is sort of a psyche laid bare, and it feels very honest. And it acknowledges that, women have deeper, darker feelings that they don't always or generally ever showcase. They are not all virtue. Women are just as complicated as men can be, possibly more complicated. Maybe I would be doing better if I had scripted this rather than I'm kind of just going off the top of my head, because it's not like, and women are people too. This is the album that taught me. It's nothing like that, but it is hard to describe just sort of how insightful this is and how sort of raw nerve it is. It makes me think of Ben Folds a little bit in the way that his lyrics hit. But of course, this is really before Ben Folds was making music. So I guess lyrically, if you know, on Fucking Run and Flower, give them a listen, I guess, if you don't. They're the ones, I think, that caught all of the lyrical attention and was like, ooh, did you hear the things that she said on that song? And I feel like the lesson learned coming out of that was, ooh, I should be transgressive and not, ooh, I should be honest. Maybe, that... and again, that's just sort of a feeling that I get because I'm did not get White Chocolate Space Egg, and her, infamously, I think it's just self-titled Liz Phair album, where she tried to sort of change gears entirely and become Avril Lavigne. She wanted to sell some more records. She didn't want to be an indie icon. She wanted to be a successful artist, getting rich in the music industry, and just wanted to sell more records, which is understandable. But then it's also understandable that a lot of people felt like that was a pure sellout, because on a lot of levels it was a literal sellout. Like, I'm trying to make music that more people will buy, as opposed to music that's burbling inside of me. But this album came from, I think, sort of the cream of the crop of some self-produced albums and material that she had done. She had made some cassettes for a while under the name Girly Sound, I think. And these are sort of re-recorded versions of the cream of the crop of those. So it had the benefit of being refined into a certain, kind of best of the best of those early compositions, and not really having the weight of expectation on it. It did go gold. Her second album, Whip Smart, also went gold, but I think Liz Phair, the album, did, in fact, outsell all of these. But it seemed to destroy her reputation, and she's never kind of really been the same since. And so it's weird that it's been a really slow roll for me kind of uncovering this album, but it is very good from beginning to end. It's just very raw, and it's not flashy at all. And I could see it being an acquired taste, because I think especially with a female vocalist, you expect something more singing voice, and whether it's a rock singer or a pop singer, you just expect something more and auto-tuned, I guess. And so it just feels very raw, very campfire, and it's a great album. So I'm going to try and make this not as long as last week's. The connection, again, not all that tough. In fact, I would have to lay it out in order to mention the one fact I think that most people know about this album. It's got 18 songs. There's another album associated with it that has 18 songs on it. This was said to be sort of a track-by-track refutation of it, but I don't know that it plays exactly that way. And I'm not familiar enough with that album to really, do let's listen to this song and then listen to this song. I don't know that it plays out one-on-one, but it was marketed, especially through the title, the number of songs, as a track-by-track commentary from the female perspective about the songs on this other album. What that album is not that difficult. So with that, if you have a guess as to what it is, you can throw that in the comments, and if you're right, you will earn a shout out in Eric's next video on the Plastic Soundwave Cult, which should come on Monday, where he connects Liz Phair's Exile in Guyville to an album in his collection. And so I think that's all I have. So I thank you for watching. Bye-bye. Good show, Ponsonby.